Oh, Erik, thank you for coming on today, buddy. We spoke a couple of times over the weekend. We just spent the first part of the show kind of with the opening salvo about Fez passing. I think,
Did?
yeah, I know. Maybe, who knows? With that show, I wouldn't put anything past him.
Exactly.
You, though, I think we both shared the sentiment. It hit me. I knew I would be sad when Fez Whatley passed away, no matter how much health issues he had. I didn't know how sad it was going to make me, and I feel like it was kind of a similar response to you as well.
It was. I can tell how much it really impacted you as you posted a black and white photo and I didn't this time.
That's true. That's true. Well, you did a whole collage at this point, but look, I only do that bit when you're just posting celebrities to try to gain a little notoriety out of someone's death. You're in a very unique set of circumstances, because not only were you were there tape to tape from kind of that relationship being fostered with O&A, and then, on Sirius, and then, what it's become. There's still, the Bennington show still exists there, and Fez was calling in and showed up on that thing. Oh God, I remember when you texted me for that Thanksgiving show, and you're like, Fez is here, and I literally remember blowing a load. I was so excited, and I think I got a grainy photograph from you, and I was like, holy shit, he's doing the big Ric Flair purple sport jacket bit. I don't know. I guess basically what I'm saying is you have a very unique position of context about, who Fez was and what he was as a performer.
Yeah, here's the thing with that show. You never really knew what was true and what wasn't. Like, what was a work, what was a shoot. Same goes for them, because they can't be this nice. Like, there's something that they're not revealing yet. There's a long con coming. And it just never did. Like, Fez was always he was insane on the air, but he was an incredibly sweet guy. I used to talk to him a lot before they went on the air, because they were on right after us and on a lot of different platforms. And then even in the afternoons, if we were just hanging out, working or doing whatever, and their show was done, Fez would come by the office and just hang out. It's like, hey guys, what's going on? He wanted to talk. Did you see Raw last night? And love talking about old wrestling. Love talking about food and just radio and all these. Like, he couldn't have been a nicer guy. And I don't know. I mean, like, he was such a major part of that show, and then to see him retire the way he did was, I don't know. It was like, you don't want anything you love, you don't want it to go away. But you had understood when the time came for him to hang it up, you were devastated. But you were like, look, that guy's been through a lot, especially on the air. Like, a lot of the stuff that was going on in his life was all on the air. You like, yeah, all right. This guy is in a lot of pain, and he really needs to find himself again and take time for himself. So when he left, it was very difficult, but you knew it was the right thing for him to do. Him leaving now, even more difficult. I know it's not by choice, but Jesus, it hits so hard when you think like, oh, like any other kind of coworker, who knows, anybody out there, if you're working with somebody, you may not feel the same way when somebody that you worked next to for so long passed. But when this came around here, this was one of those devastating moments. This was like part of your family had gone, and it's been a few days now, and it's still not any easier.
I think you're right, and I think one of the reasons why it is, because whenever you're someone that I opened the show, said whenever someone you admire or felt close to or whatever passes away, you're going to be sad. But I think it was the uniqueness, Erik, the fact that the show was unlike any other show ever to begin with, and then hearing Fez do those characters and do those bits and be hilarious, and then for him to transform into this guy having a full-fledged mental breakdown in front of you, which was, in my opinion, equally as entertaining, if not more so, than anything I've ever heard. And selfishly, you're talking about I remember when he retired. I remember I was in a hotel room in Oklahoma, and I was listening, and I was like, oh, I wish he'd just stay, because it's easy for me to say as a listener, but I just enjoyed that soap opera so much as a talk radio fan, because I think you're built the same way. I'm not listening to Howard Stern for him to interview fucking Lady Gaga for 2 hours. Like, I could give a shit about that. Howard Stern getting into a massive fight with Gary and then having that spill over onto the sides where that's what I'm listening for. And that was what the Ron and Fez show had become, which was, 3 hours of that each and every day.
Yeah, we're listening to weeks and weeks of saga of Fez swearing he heard his cat say cookie, you know, and then he brings the cat into the studio, and for 3 hours the cat does nothing. And you're like, of course this is the payout for it. This is exactly what you want to hear. And the other thing that works with that show too is, when I was saying it feels like a member of your family dies, the way that dynamic was for that show, they were family. Like, Fez and Ron knew each other for 40-something years, 50 years maybe. I mean, from Ron and Ron to Ron and Fez down in Florida to Ron and Fez in New York to Ron and Fez in JFK to Ron and Fez to XM to Ron and Fez to Sirius XM to Ron and Fez to Free FM to the Bennington show. It's always been them. And everybody that was on that show working together, they were always like a family. That was the reason. If you didn't know anything about them, you would be like, how are they so cruel to each other? But once you know and understand the dynamic, they were a family. They're the only ones that could be that way to each other and then be perfectly fine with the outcome, things that were said, and it was no big deal. And that was a dynamic that no show had. Like, no shows that we loved or were ever big in talk radio had the family element. They did.
Yeah, I would agree. This is going to be kind of a nuanced question, but you were there, so I would assume you would be able to give me a better answer than most people. There was phases of it too. There was the part where he was mad at, where Eastside Dave's actually coming on the show for the first time ever later in the week, which I'm excited about. But when he was having all those problems with Dave, he still had most of his faculties about him. So you're kind of getting this weird blend of, like, Fez is still an entertainer, but he's also paranoid and he thinks people are out to get him and supplant him. And that was, kind of in the midway point between full-fledged, I'm so locked up and I can't speak for 3 straight hours. What were those years like, do you think? Because I know you were around, but you also were such a listener of the show, Erock. Right. Because to me, that's some of the most incredibly interesting radio, just because it's crazy people doing a show together that are all real funny. But, like, it was right in the middle of kind of where he ultimately would go.
It was interesting, but it was just really weird because up until that point, we knew him as, he was very calm and passive, not on the air. But then when Ron Fez would go on, he was, big and boisterous Fez. He was loud. He was yelling at Billy Staples and Al Dukes and Earl and Dave and screaming, and heads are going to roll. Like, he was Ron's muscle, if you will. And then after the incident with his grandmother and then having heart attacks, and he just kind of slowed down and couldn't do it all the time. And I think what was really telling is one time on the Ron and Fez show, they did 2 different weeks. They had Ron kind of gave him an ultimatum saying, it's like, we need you to do more for the show. So we're going to have, the first week is going to be called Week, and WEAK. WEEK. So it's like, you can be as weak as you want. You can sit there. You don't have to talk. You don't have to do anything. You can be as weak as you want. He goes, but the next week comes up, and that's Strong Week, and you got to be on all cylinders, and there's no room for to regressing emotionally and not talking. And he's like, you got to come and you got to bring the A game. You got to do all this stuff. So it was interesting to see that when the first week came, Fez did pull back and really was not doing a whole hell of a lot. And then the second week came, and then all of a sudden the Ric Flair showed up again. And you're like, this is Fez. Why can't Fez do this all the time? But, look, the guy never had to answer for his performance ever, despite what management was saying, despite what listeners were saying. The amount of radio and history that guy gave you, no matter what market you listened to him, what station, wherever they were, he earned his spot. He earned his place. He didn't owe anybody anything. especially at that point. Did it suck that, at the times where he wasn't the same guy anymore? Of course it did, especially being a listener and a fan to that show. But he didn't owe us anything.
Right.
So you just had to ride it out, and hopefully he was trying to figure it out on the air. And by the time he did, he realized he couldn't do this anymore, and he decided to retire. But yeah, Fez owed nobody anything.
Did you get a chance to speak with him at that? For those that don't know, that Ron and Fez always did a Thanksgiving show at the Hard Rock, and then Bennington, which is his show with his daughter, does a Thanksgiving show at the Hard Rock, and they snuck Fez up, and he came out and they did like a wrestling spot, and they just put up on Instagram a really nice picture of them embracing at that event. You were there. Did you get to talk to him at that event?
Oh yeah, I was.
How did
there
that go?
That was Thanksgiving 2018 at the Hard Rock in New York City.
I was so excited.
So yeah, we're backstage before the show, and the back part of the Hard Rock is where they usually load in for bands, their equipment and stuff, and where the bands get to sneak it into the building so the people around the front and the audience doesn't see them. And we were back there before the show started, and I remember there was security by the back. So I asked, what's the security for? And they said, oh, there's some special guests coming. Okay. So I'm thinking they have some kind of band, because usually they have some kind of musician shows up for a lot of their things. So I was like, wow, that's interesting that they have the security. I wonder who it is showing up. Didn't find out until minutes before he was hitting the stage, and all of a sudden, Fez comes in the back, and I'm like, holy fuck, it's Fez. Everybody else back there either didn't know who Fez was because they were Hard Rock people, security people, whatever, or they were significant others from other people who were going to be on the show. And so Fez came in, nobody made a big fuss backstage, and it was they're going to do the big reveal. So I left the backstage. I went out into the audience because at that point I didn't want to know anymore. So I went out there and I'm watching, and I think some of the photos I sent you were from, one of the upper box areas on the side, where I just watched like everybody else because I wanted to experience what this was going to be. And the Ric Flair music came in, and he came out, and the
pop was huge. I remember
the pop was huge.
It was unbelievable.
And he had a cane, and I think he smacked Ron like a wrestling move, knocked out Ron. And then Chris Stanley came running up with a chair. Like, it turned into a whole wrestling thing.
It always does.
And yeah, because Fez came out, grabbed the mic, started screaming, doing a wrestling promo, and then hit Ron with the cane, and the place goes nuts. And it was just it was an insane night.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I'm glad. So you spoke to him then there. I heard Jimmy talking about this as well. Like, everyone said that since he went down to Florida, that had interacted with him, that he seemed to be in really good spirits. Like, whatever was going on with him, like as a performer, a lot of that subsided when he did retire. At least I hope that's the way that it turned out. Did you have a similar experience when you spoke with him?
He was happy. He was content. He didn't, physically he wasn't the best, but he didn't have any of those, I don't want to say they were self-imposed, but he didn't have any of those reservations, any of that, like a governor cap on him from keeping him from being jovial and just, the happy and polite and kind man that he was. And yeah, getting a chance to talk to him, gave him a big hug, and we talked for a little bit of how he was doing, and he was doing a lot better. I mean, outside, I guess, physical health, but mentally he was doing a lot better after he retired. He was living down in Florida. He was enjoying himself. He was going to Bucks games, and I don't know. It's just what he needed, I suppose. He was down there with his family, and he was happy again.
Yeah, that's good. I hope that's kind of the way he spent his last years, because certainly was a tortured soul up until that point. One last thing for you, Erock. It was funny because Tor brought it up, and it's a great point. It's one I spent a lot of my career talking about talk radio and how great it is, but the pirate ship mentality, when it's shows that are not only in the same building but interacting with each other and like bumping into each other in the fucking coffee room, I just think that's that's just so incredibly valuable, and it helped create some of the most unique stuff on earth, and that's why you have a homeless shopping spree. You know, there's Fez getting arrested for being homeless, you know, and all the stuff that's going on.
But hold on a second. You realize, though, that you brought up the homeless shopping spree with Fez being there. Do you realize that when it went all over the news, and you're talking BBC International, CNN, that the main clip they showed of the homeless walking around shopping was Fez? So the next day, when we're playing all the clips and stuff, Fez was essentially the face of the homeless shopping spree. Yeah. And he wasn't supposed to be on there. This was some kind of last-minute thing that Ron said, oh, Fez is going with you. And Fez is like, what? And then all of a sudden we're just corralling him up and putting him on the bus to take him to the mall to go shopping. And so now Fez is with all the homeless people because Ron just made him go. And we took him shopping. We bought him things for Christmas. And then Fez was just all over the news as, you know, us being kind to a homeless man. And it just was poor Fez.
The picture of him is so hilarious that they use. But he always, I mean, he had that innate ability, though, Erock. I don't know if you ever saw that segment. I think it's called Tiny Man Photoshops Movie Stars. But it's like Jake Gyllenhaal and Catherine Bell or someone getting a picture taken. It's serious. And then just Fez's face is in the lower left hand because he's down at the fishbowl stalking the movie stars like he used to do.
Oh, I forgot all about that.
Oh, dude, it's that fucking hilarious.
That wasn't a bit. See, what Fez was doing was, in any other place, I guess this would be the way to handle it. But Fez would go down whenever there was talent at the what they called the fishbowl, which was just a big glass performance area at Sirius, so you could see interviews being done, you could see bands playing and whatever. And Fez would go down there to talk to, not to the talents or anything, but he would talk to the handler or the publicist that was with them. And he would give them a card and talk to them about maybe trying to get them on for one of the many different interview things that Bennington was doing, the Unmasked or the town hall stuff, any of those things. So he was essentially doing his job, but because of the way Sirius runs, it's just a celebrity hub. There's also like 5 to 6 different talent bookers in the building, so they would get annoyed that Fez would come down there when there was somebody performing or being interviewed in the front, and then they just kind of put up a roadblock, like. Almost like when a stalker is showing up somewhere, they have photos everywhere, like, do not let this man into the building. So, unfortunately for Fez, they guess they were complaining, and then so now it became a thing where not only the talent bookers, but the talent assistants and interns and everybody knew that if Fez is coming down here to alert somebody, that Fez isn't supposed to be down here talking to these people. And yeah, unfortunately that became a running gag that Fez was just stalking celebrities.
And it started the K-Corn incident, I believe, because that's when he was freaking out about not being allowed down on the fishbowl and saying that everybody was a homophobe. Yeah. Then that's when he said K-Corn. It's just the best.
If nobody knows what we're talking about, which
Tor does, I guarantee that. And there's a couple of weirdos out there that listen to old segments all the time.
Go look up Ron and Fez K-Corn because he's talking about this particular incident that we're discussing, and he says the wrong word, and then it just became an hour and actually 2 days worth of stuff.
Yeah.
That they just were constantly ragging on him for saying the wrong thing.
Well, because you guys were doing the Sports Center bit on O&A at the same time, so it just never died. Like, it continued being like a vicious cycle, because then they would take that audio of the O&A show and play it on theirs, and then Fez would get upset again. It was fucking beautiful.
Oh, yeah, it was. It was. We used to have, you know what, now I'm thinking about, totally random, but we used to have Ron and Fez do a run-in when we were doing the show. When we went back to CBS, we took over after David Lee Roth failed. And we were doing the whole East Coast and Midwest syndication from what was left of Howard Stern's syndication. After Free FM ended, and Ron and Fez had a show on Free FM, which only aired in New York in the evening. They flipped the station back to K-Rock, which was a rock station, and the new PD that was in there, and she didn't like Ron and Fez. She didn't think they were funny. She didn't think they were interesting. She didn't want them in her building and all this stuff. It was just total bullshit. So while we do the CBS show, we're also simulcast on XM. So we still have to cater to, both audiences, and the audience knows and loves Ron and Fez. So we used to do these radio wars with the Ron and Fez show. And there would be times in the middle of our show, all of a sudden, like Eastside Dave would come running into the studio screaming, and then Fez came running in. There should be video of this. Fez came running in, stripped off all his clothes down to this sexy outfit, and hopped on the stripper pole that was in the studio and started doing a dance while we were trying to do the show. And then Ron's just sitting there, screaming as a wrestling promo, punking us out. It's like what other show would allow another show to do this if you weren't friends with them for so long and knew that anything they do would deliver?
Dude, there was a point where Dave comes running in, and then he's trying to fight Master Po, and then he's shitting his hand and he's chasing it. I mean, and that happened with you, where Dave was chasing you around with his ass that one time, and you broke your wrist, right?
Yeah, we were trying to. I forgot what Dave was doing. We were trying to get away.
He was being fucking disgusting, is what he was doing.
Yeah, and we had these big, heavy doors from the studio that would essentially, as it was getting close to the wall, it automatically would, like a suction thing, would pull in to lock the door and make it soundproof. And we were trying to get out of the way, and as I'm pulling the door, he hit the door. The door slams right in over my hand and almost broke my hand because of how heavy that thing was. And because Dave was probably doing something like, he used to do a bit called Guess What's Up Eastside Dave's Ass.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it's a Hot Wheel car. Oh, this week it's a blow pop. This week it's chapstick. It was just a bit that nobody asked for and nobody wanted, but Dave would come in and just deliver the way Eastside Dave does. And that time almost broke my hand. But
yeah, I was a big mark for Fuck Twat the Clown. That was one of my favorites.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Master Po fucking kicked Dave in the. Do you remember that? He kicked Dave in the chest because he was going to run out into the hallway or something after Erik.
Something like that.
It was bedlam. Those years were bedlam. Wait, hold on.
Do you remember what?
Tor's been trying to ask you a question for 20 minutes.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Well, Erock, I'm going to be compiling a little list of the best clips for the show for listeners that want to start. What's your go-to clip to recommend for the Ron and Fez show?
Go-to clip would be, for the longest time, Ron was, for many, many years, you may remember this from the FM days too, but Ron loved a cowbell. And he always had the cowbell that he would hit. Well, if they decided to just start playing music, Ron would just sit there with a drumstick and a cowbell, hitting the cowbell. But then during the XM years, it became sort of a weapon and punishment to Fez or to anybody if they screwed up. So if they did something he didn't like, we wouldn't hear from him while the other person was yelling, and all of a sudden a cowbell would go flying across the room and hit them in the head, in the chest. And you'd hear them react to being hit by a flying piece of metal. I think I sent you a clip of that.
Yeah, we played it. We played it at the beginning of the show, actually, the little montage.
Oh, perfect.
It's fucking... Yeah. And the cowbell sounded so great flying through the air and then hitting someone in the head.
Because the clip, if you played it earlier, the clip is essentially Fez and Ron are having an argument. And while Fez is trying to explain his side, Ron whips a cowbell across. It hits the console and hits Fez in the face. And Fez is like, "Ow, that hurts. That really hurts." And Ron's like, "Well, how do you think I feel?" It's always about Ron. And then he goes, "Wait a minute." What you don't hear in that clip is a little later, he calls Dave into the room, thinking that Dave's going to justify something that they're discussing. Dave comes in and goes, "Yeah," and Ron whips the cowbell at Dave, and you hear Dave screaming. And he goes, "This is what I got to deal with, unprofessionals."
Dude, there was one where fucking... we're talking about Ron, it's about Fez, but Ron was talking about it was when Fez was trying to find the subway lover, and
the subway stalker.
It's the best. I've been sending that one around to people, and he said, Fez, you should put your name in the missed connections, in the New York Times, like that's what New York Post or whatever, like that's what people do, missed connections. He goes, one time I saw my name in missed connections, and Fez goes, "Oh really, why is that?" He goes, "Yeah, it said to the animal that spit on my child, I hope you burn in hell." I fucking laughed about that for months.
Do you remember another quick bit? Do you remember when Ron had to go to the hospital for some kind of procedure? I forget what it was.
His
for.
appendix. His appendix.
Oh, it was appendix. Okay. Yeah. And then so Fez showed, now Ron has visited Fez many times during heart attacks.
He's always in the
stints,
hospital.
Yeah, everything, right? And Ron does go and he sits by with Fez, and because they're brothers essentially. And now the one time that it's reversed, that Ron had to go to the hospital. So Fez comes to visit him, and Fez brings him a gift that Ron would not let go for years. He would not let go, complaining about what a terrible gift Fez brought him. And Fez brought him a Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue.
Yeah.
And Ron goes, "What is this?" He's like, "You could have brought me, he was listing all different types of foods that he likes in Manhattan that you could have brought him. Anything other than an already read Sports Illustrated issue." And
but then Ron would
wouldn't let it go.
Don't you remember though? Like then Ron would drop Sports Illustrated's off for Fez anytime that he was in there for a heart attack. Ron dropped the Sports Illustrated off for Hillary Clinton when she was in the hospital. He fucking stopped by and said he tried to go up to see her and they wouldn't let him up, so he dropped the Sports Illustrated off for her, which is fucking hilarious. Erik, I don't know. Kumi is such a different cat. I remember one time when something horrible happened to you and you said, Anthony's not going to think about this the moment he gets out of here. He's the type of guy that really doesn't concern himself with things like this, but I know you're going to address it on, it's Erik Nagel, of course. Is it going to come up on, like, what's going to happen on Anthony's show for this? Like, how's Compound going to react to all this?
Yeah, Anthony's going to talk about it. For those of you listening today as this episode comes out, yes, Anthony is going to address it. And if you're listening to this on any other day, you can go to compoundmedia.com and find Monday's episode to hear Anthony addressing it. We have some prizes in store with that. So
good.
Yeah, he's all set to go with that. Everybody from that I still talk to from our world and from the Bennington world, Ron and Fez world. Look, everybody's upset. Everybody's devastated. And I don't know if everybody's they're surprised to hear the news, but I don't think they're surprised to know how it happened. But doesn't make it any easier, knowing that. And everybody's been reaching out to each other and talking about it. I didn't get to hear Jim and Sam today, so I'm sure they addressed it, but I didn't get to hear it.
I heard some of it. I mean, Jim sounded legit upset. Like it was a lot of Sam kind of reliving old segments because he had that feud with Fez for years, and that was another part where I never knew how much of that was real and how much of that was fake. That he was always attacking Sam instead of anyone else. Opie Anthony, Norton, Ron, and that was kind of a big component of it as well. But Norton sounded like he was pretty fucked up, to be honest with you.
I'm sure he was. I don't doubt that at all. And then, the time that your episode comes out, and you're like, I'm not trying to counter program anything, but 2 p.m. Eastern on this day, Bennington's going on, and they're addressing that. So,
well, I'm going to be listening to that. I hope people are listening to that instead of this.
Well, yeah. I mean, go listen to the look. This is the rare time that I'll ever promote SiriusXM, but channel 103, 2 p.m. Eastern time for the Bennington show. Plus, they have their own on-demand. Go listen to that. Hear everything about Fez and what Ron has to say, because that's what's going to mean the most. 2 to 5, I think they're on. And then, look, your podcast thing is automatically going to download Chad's show. So when that's done, then you go over and listen to Chad's show.
Good advice. It is at Erock Radio. Of course, it's Erik Nagel. What else, Erock? How can people consume things that you're doing?
It doesn't matter. It's fine. It's not about me today. It's about Fez.
Well, I do appreciate you taking the time the first day we're back, because, if I'm making a short list of people that I wanted to speak to about this, you're on it. So thank you for that. And I know it's still a bummer, man. Like, it's still hanging around with me longer than I certainly expected it to.
Yeah, I mean, just seeing your social media posts, even today, I saw you respond to the Bennington Post, and I said, Jesus Christ, Chad's taking it just as hard as everybody else is.
Yeah,
and,
yeah, it's a bummer. It's a real bummer.
It is.
And also, I don't care about my family at all, so it's like when stuff like this happens, then I get really upset. All right. And when you go, Erik, my God, can you imagine we're going to do a whole week here on the episode? Actually, I'm planning on going before you, so hopefully I won't have to do that.
I was planning on you going before me as well.
Oh,
so
good.
I was going to say that's not going to happen.
Well, let's hope I can live up to with the way I drink. I could probably live up to that end of the bargain. You're more of a clean living soul now.
The day that you go, any of the Chad Dukes radio show merch I have is going right on the eBay, because I'll get top dollar at that particular time.
I do appreciate that.
Of course, I love you. No worries.
Love you too, brother. Always appreciate everything you do for this show on the mic and behind the mic. And thank you so much for making time today.
And Tor's a good boy. Keep him around.
He is a good boy. The only thing I'll lose him to is a fish. That's the only thing that he seems to take over his prowess. The great Erik Nagel, Erock Radio on the Chad Duke Show.